In fact, there are some things that really contribute to that. First is assumptions. Assumptions are the unstated things that we presume, whoops, didn't mean to go forward there. Assumptions are the unstated parameters, constraints that we put on our solution problem-solving approach. It's just, we all make assumptions about things. And we have to be careful that our assumptions are not boxing us in to coming up with a wrong solution. We have to be careful about our conditioning and the habits that we've built, because they are the kinds of things that contribute to us having assumptions. It's important for us to understand what's called the reptilian response mechanism. And the reptilian response mechanism happens at the, I think it's either the cortex or, let's go back. It's there, at the top of the brainstem, there's this little thing about the size of a walnut. And it's the core part, the central part of the brain. Everything, all of your senses, stuff goes in through that. Your touch and your feel and your smell, it all goes through that. And this is the oldest part of the brain. It's the core central part of the brain. And this is where all stimuluses are first dealt with on an autonomic level. Reptiles, whether you're thinking about a snake or an alligator or lizard, it doesn't matter. Reptiles see everything on the planet as one of three things. If you exist to a reptile as one of three things. You're either a threat, or you're food, or you're a mate. If you're not one of those three things, a reptile is going to ignore you. You're basically a rock or a tree. As far as a reptile is concerned, if you're not one of those three things, it's not paying attention to you. Now, we have a similar mechanism in our brain. And I'm going to deal with the threat mechanism aspect of this. Have you ever been in a huge auditorium and it's dark and there's somebody on stage? It could be a lecturer, it could be a musical act, it could be a theater act, it doesn't matter. Something's on stage that you're paying attention to. Way off to this side, somebody gets up and starts to move and you notice. They open a door and almost everybody's head is going to turn and look. We can't help but notice motion. We are hardwired to look at motion as opposed to, motion is a differentiator in the pattern of the visual periphery or visual range. When motion occurs, we single it out, we look at it, and we assess what is that motion. We're looking for a threat. We're hardwired to do that, just like a reptile. Now, we're hardwired in more ways than just as a reptile. New ideas, anything new in our environment, including new ideas, are treated as if they're potentially a threat. Our first reaction to all new things in our environment is this a threat? Now that works well for us when we're driving and when we're in crowded spaces, because we have to look for those things. But when we're in the world of business, we look at threats a little differently. We look at them as new ideas that might disrupt the status quo. If you're a manager and somebody brings a new idea to you, your first thought is going to be, well, how is that going to impact what's going on? How is that going to harm or upset the status quo? So when new ideas are brought to a manager, the manager's first reaction is this going to bother or hurt things? Is it going to cause a problem? When you bring a new idea to a manager, you need to know that that's going to be their first reaction. So you need to be prepared with objection overcomers. You need to be prepared to overcome the objections and think like a manager and be prepared to overcome the objections that are going to be going through that manager's mind. And flip it around when you become the manager and people are bringing new ideas to you. It's going to be natural for you to assess them as a threat first and then look at them for their potential benefit. So Keep in mind that threat assessment happens with everybody and with ideas. And ideas can be a threat to the status quo just as they can be a benefit. Then there's the Pygmalion Effect, something else which basically says that expectations have a determining factor, a contributory factor into the results. If you expect good things out of students, if you expect good things out of your kids, you're going to be more likely to get good things and get positive results than if you expect failure. If you expect your team to be creative and to find a solution because you know they can and you reinforce that expectation, you're going to get more solutions than you're going to get failures. If, on the other hand, you diminish and or expect failure, you're going to get more failures than you will solutions. It's the concept of the self-fulfilling prophecy. Let's talk about brainstorming for just a moment because we're just about done. Brainstorming is a wonderful process, but there's a lot of controversy as to whether or not brainstorming is really genuinely effective. There have been a lot of studies that have been done, and they indicate that brainstorming really is only effective if the following things are in place. First and foremost, you must defer judgment. Nothing will quash the quality and quantity of ideas that are being put forth by as much as somebody going, oh, that's stupid or that's silly, especially if that person is a senior person. So when you get a group of people together for a brainstorming session where you're trying to solve a problem, your first thing is to encourage any and all ideas, use them, get them out there, no matter how silly they might be, because even a silly idea might stimulate somebody else's creative idea that finds the solution to the problem. Quantity is quality. So you want to get as many ideas out there as you possibly can. Use a facilitator that is outside the department. Don't use a supervisor in the department because nobody wants to put ideas that are silly out there in front of somebody that has authority over them and might consider them to be less than, sort of properly serious about their job. Limit the time and limit the size of the group, typically to about a group that can consume 2 supergiant sized pizzas. I'm talking about 14, 16 inchers. So in other words, limit the group to somewhere between 6 to 10 people. Anything larger than that and it starts to become counterproductive. Put them in a circle so that they can react with each other, or make 2 different groups in a circle around a table so that you get sort of competing groups for competing for the most ideas. Diversity is a great idea because the more people from diverse backgrounds and diverse skill sets and diverse perspectives, the more good ideas that you're going to get. So those are some good ways to stimulate brainstorming. And then last but not least, always try to ask the question, how might we? Encourage people at all levels of your organization to be willing to politely challenge the status quo and ask the question of, how might we do this differently? Have we considered this other way? And just because they don't like the answer doesn't mean that or you don't like the question does. And maybe the answer is yes, we thought about that, but stimulate, allow, encourage people to ask questions and to challenge leadership and authority. Because it's only by leadership and authority being willing to be challenged that ideas are going to percolate up and achieve some opportunity to be looked at seriously.